History records events, but literature gives those events a voice. A very warm and pleasant evening to everyone present here. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to the Fortnightly Symposium of the In Tandem Research Club organized by the PG and Research Department of English, Queen Maris College, Chennai. On behalf of the department, I extend my warm greetings to our respected head of the department, Dr. Maria Preeti Srinivasan ma'am, esteemed faculty members, our paper presenter, and dear friends who have joined us today. The theme of the academic year 2026 to 27 is Popular Culture and Literature. As part of this theme, today's symposium focuses on the fascinating topic representing history in popular literature and media. This topic invites us to think about how history is remembered, represented, questioned, and even retold through literature and contemporary media. It is now my privilege to introduce our paper presenter for today's session, Mrs. Madhivadhani R, a second year MA English Literature student at Queen Maris College, Chennai. She will be presenting her paper entitled The Necessity of Feminism, a reading of Afghan women's digital narratives and Adichie's We Should All Be Feminists. So, without further delay, let us welcome Mrs. Madhivadhani R to present her paper. Over to you, Madhivadhani.
Good evening, everyone. Respected HOD ma'am, respected faculty members, and all the distinguished members of the In Tandem Research Club. A very warm welcome to everyone. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to share something personal. Around a month ago, I had already planned to do research in this area. But honestly, I never imagined that my topic would eventually connect so closely with the theme of the In Tandem Research Club. Interestingly, HOD ma'am asked me to work on this particular topic, and it connected directly with one of my favorite areas of interest, Afghan women. I was genuinely glad about this because I realized that I was not simply reacting to a social media post or expressing my concern about Afghan women. I was actually getting an opportunity to contribute through research to a conversation about their freedom, dignity, visibility, and agency. So, I would like to sincerely thank our HOD ma'am for giving me this opportunity and all my staff members who supported, guided, and encouraged me throughout this work. Let's begin. My topic is the necessity of feminism through the reading of Afghan women's digital narratives and Adichie's We Should All Be Feminists. The central concern of my paper is very simple. Is feminism really something that belongs to the past, or is it still necessary in the present? My research argues that feminism continues to be necessary because gender inequality is still an ongoing reality. So, with that, I would like to begin. To understand my research, I would first like to briefly explain how my paper connects with the broader theme of popular culture and literature. My paper focuses on popular culture and literature, specifically on representing history through literature and media. I examine how literary and cultural narratives can represent histories and experiences that are often marginalized or overlooked. In my paper, I use feminism as a critical lens to examine the representation of women's experiences, particularly in relation to the historical struggles of Afghan women. So, feminism is not a separate topic here, rather, it helps me analyze how literature and media represent, interpret, and give visibility to particular historical experiences. And this is where my interest in feminism becomes connected with Afghan women's history and their digital narratives. To understand why feminism remains necessary, I think it is important to briefly understand how feminism itself has developed. We generally understand feminism through its different waves. The first wave was strongly concerned with legal and political rights. Then the second wave expanded the discussion towards women's freedom in domestic and social life. The third wave questioned whether the experiences of all women were actually being represented within feminism. And today, when we talk about the fourth wave, one of the major changes we see is the importance of digital spaces and digital agency. This is particularly interesting because digital platforms have changed the question of who gets to tell a woman's story. Earlier, women were very often represented by others, but today, through social media and other digital platforms, women can increasingly become the narrators of their own experiences. And this becomes particularly significant in the case of Afghan women. Through their digital testimonies, Afghan women document their experiences of restrictions, education, identity, and freedom, and they communicate those experiences to audiences beyond Afghanistan. So, social media is not functioning only as a communication platform here. It can also become a kind of digital archive of women's experiences and testimonies. And that brings me to the larger question behind my research. If women are still using these platforms to speak about inequality, restrictions, and their rights, can we really say that feminism is only a historical movement? My research suggests that we cannot. Feminism continues to have relevance because the forms of inequality may change, but gender inequality itself has certainly not disappeared. And this leads directly to what I wanted to explore through my research. The main purpose of my research is to understand why feminism continues to be necessary even today. While working on this topic, I wanted to look at this question through two different but connected perspectives. One is the lived experiences of Afghan women, particularly the ways in which they speak about restrictions on their education, movement, employment, identity, and freedom. The other is Adichie's We Should All Be Feminist, where she talks about the everyday social expectations that shape women's lives and limit their visibility and opportunities. So, rather than looking at these two contexts separately, my research tries to bring them into conversation with each other. At the same time, I don't want to suggest that Afghan women and Adichie experience gender inequality in exactly the same way. That is where Chandra Talpade Mohanty's idea of transnational feminism becomes important to my research. It helps me ask how we can recognize connections between women's experiences across different societies while still respecting their historical, cultural, and political differences. Another important aspect of my research is the role of digital spaces. I look at Afghan women's digital testimonies not simply as social media content, but as ways through which women document their experiences, make themselves visible, and exercise agency even when their physical and public spaces are restricted. So ultimately, my research brings together feminism, Afghan women's experiences, digital agency, and transnational feminism to understand one central question. Why is feminism still necessary in the contemporary world? Before explaining transnational feminism, I would like to briefly introduce Mohanty's important essay, Under Western Eyes Feminist Scholarship and Colonial Discourses. In this essay, Mohanty questions the way some Western feminist scholarship represents women from the so called Third World. Her concern is that very different women can sometimes be represented as if they are one single homogeneous group of oppressed women who simply need to be rescued. Mohanty challenges this way of thinking because it can erase women's individual histories, political conditions, cultural contexts, and most importantly, their agency. What she wants us to do instead is to understand women as subjects within a particular historical and social condition. So, Mohanty's argument is not that women from different places cannot be compared. Her argument is that comparison should not become generalization. And this is exactly why her theory is useful for my research on Afghan women. Now, coming to transnational feminism. Mohanty's approach is important because it questions the tendency to place all women into one universal category and assume that women everywhere experience oppression in exactly the same way. Women experience oppression within particular political, historical, social, and cultural contexts. So, instead of simply saying women everywhere suffer in the same way, we need to ask what is the particular context in which this woman is experiencing oppression. This becomes extremely important when I compare Adichie's arguments with Afghan women's experiences. For example, Adichie discusses social expectations that can make women less visible, less confident, or less willing to take space. Afghan women, meanwhile, can experience much more direct institutional restrictions on their education, employment, movement, and public presence. These experiences are connected, but they are certainly not identical. And I think this distinction is very important to my research. I'm not trying to say that the experiences of an Afghan woman and the experience discussed by Adichie are the same. Instead, I'm asking whether we can identify certain patriarchal patterns across different contexts, but still acknowledging the differences between them. That is what transnational feminism allows me to do. And this framework becomes especially useful when we look at the historical situation of Afghan women. Before discussing the present situation, we need to understand how Afghan women's rights have changed historically. During the Taliban's rule from 1996 to 2001, Afghan women experienced severe restrictions. These included restrictions on education, employment, dress, mobility, freedom, and participation in public life. But after the Taliban lost power, the situation changed in several important ways. Afghan women began participating more actively in education, employment, and political life. For example, my paper refers to the 2010 parliamentary election, where women occupied 69 out of 249 seats in the lower house. This is important because it shows that Afghan women were not simply absent from political life. There was a period in which they were able to participate more openly, even though problems such as poverty and violence continued. However, in 2021, when the Taliban regained power, many of those freedoms were again severely restricted. And this historical moment is very important to my argument. It shows that women's rights do not necessarily follow a straight line of progress. Rights can be gained, restricted, and even taken away depending on political circumstances. So, when we look at Afghanistan, the necessity of feminism becomes particularly visible because the struggle is not only about gaining rights, it is also about protecting rights that women have already fought for and achieved. And when physical and public spaces become restricted, another space becomes particularly significant, that is the digital space. This brings me to one of the important concepts in my research, digital agency. When women's physical and public spaces are restricted, digital spaces can provide an alternative space where they can speak about their experiences. For Afghan women, social media can become a way to document what is happening to them, share their struggles, and communicate with audiences beyond Afghanistan. Through these digital narratives, they can create visibility and challenge the idea that they are simply silent victims. But there is also a contradiction here. The digital space gives women an opportunity to speak, but speaking itself can involve risks. My paper refers to Afghan women's need to conceal their identities for their own safety. So, even when they speak online, they are still speaking within conditions of restriction. And that is precisely what makes their narrative so significant. They are not simply social media posts, they can become acts of testimony, visibility, and resistance. In other words, when a woman who has been denied space in the physical world creates a space for herself online, that act itself can become a form of agency. And from here, I move to Adichie's work because she also talks extensively about the ways in which women are taught to make themselves smaller. Now, I move from Afghan women's digital narratives to Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's We Should All Be Feminist. It is important to note that Adichie's feminist argument also reached a global audience through a digital platform. Her TEDx talk transformed her personal experiences and observations into a wider feminist conversation. However, I see an important difference between Adichie's digital presence and Afghan women's digital testimonies. Adichie mainly uses the digital platform to communicate and explain feminist ideas about gender expectations, social conditioning, and gender roles. Afghan women, on the other hand, often use digital platforms to document their lived realities, making experiences of restriction and oppression visible to the outside world. So, while both use digital platforms, their purposes and circumstances are different. Adichie's platform becomes a space for feminist discourse, while Afghan women's digital narratives can become spaces of testimony, documentation, and resistance. This difference is important because it prevents me from placing all women's experiences into one category. And this is where Mohanty's transnational feminist perspective becomes useful. Let me take a simple example from Adichie's childhood. She wanted to become the class monitor and was qualified for the position. Yet, a boy was chosen because the position was automatically associated with boys. What is significant here is that nobody had to directly tell her that girls could not lead. The assumption itself already existed. This illustrates what Adichie means when she talks about women being taught to shrink themselves. Social expectations can encourage women to become less visible and less willing to occupy positions of authority. This is clearly different from the Afghan context, where women can face direct institutional restrictions on public participation. However, we can still identify a broader connection, the regulation of women's visibility and participation. Mohanty's framework helps me recognize this connection without claiming that these experiences are identical. So the point is not to say that Adichie's experience and Afghan women's experiences are the same, but to understand how different forms of patriarchy can operate in different social and public political contexts. And next, we can talk about the education and employment and the restrictions facing by Afghan women. Education gives us another useful way to understand this difference. Aditi asks, what if in raising children we focus on ability instead of gender? I think this question is important because it challenges the assumption that gender should determine what a person is capable of doing or what opportunities they should receive. Now, when we look at the Afghan context, the issue becomes much more serious. My paper refers to the testimony of are held here. This is an Instagram account name, an Afghan woman who speaks about educational barriers. Afghan women and girls have faced severe restrictions on access to education, including restrictions beyond the sixth grade. But despite these restrictions, some women continue their education through online spaces. And this is where education becomes more than simply learning. For these women, continuing education can itself become an act of resistance and agency. The same difference becomes visible when we talk about employment. Adichie refers to Bangari Maathai, who is a Kenyan Nobel laureate. Her quotation is the higher you go, the fewer then women are. Here, the issue is the underrepresentation of women in positions of power. But in Afghanistan, the problem can become much more institutional. Women can face restrictions that prevent them from entering or continuing in educational and employment spaces in the first place. So, once again, the connection is gender inequality, but the form and intensity of that inequality are different. And this difference is exactly what transnational feminism asks us to recognize. The next restrictions women facing are on culture and mobility. Another important area that comes into my analysis is culture. Adichie says people make culture. I find this statement important because it reminds us that culture is not something completely fixed or beyond questioning. People create cultural practices, maintain them, and importantly, they can also question and change them. Adichie gives us another interesting example from Lagos. Imagine wanting to enter a club with your friends. You arrive at the entrance, but then you discover that there is a condition you are a woman and you are not accompanied by a man. Suddenly, something as ordinary as entering a social space is no longer simply about your choice. At first, this might sound like a small incident, but now I want to take that same question and move it to Afghanistan. What happens when the restriction is no longer simply about entering a club, but about a women's movement in public life itself? Afghan women can face much stronger restrictions involving male accompaniment or mahram. So now the question becomes much bigger. Who gets to decide where a woman can go and under what conditions is she allowed to move? When we look at Afghanistan, women experience restrictions relating to clothing, education, employment, movement, and public participation. But here, I want to make an important distinction. We should not simply say Afghan culture is the cause of women's oppression. That would be a very simplistic explanation. Instead, we need to look at the specific political, historical, and institutional conditions that shape Afghan women's lives. Again, this is where Mohanty's transnational feminism becomes important. It prevents us from reducing a complex situation to a single cultural explanation. At the same time, the comparison with Adichie's Lagos example helps us see a broader issue. Women's freedom of movement can be regulated in different social and political contexts. In Lagos, Adichie describes a situation where a woman's access to certain spaces may depend on male accompaniment. In Afghanistan, the restrictions can be much stronger and can affect women's movement in public spaces more broadly, including restrictions involving a mahram. Mahram means a male accompaniment in Afghanistan. So there is a connection between these experiences, but the circumstances and consequences are very different. and therefore comparison should not erase differences. Rather, comparison should help us understand those differences more clearly. This is the Instagram testimonies of real world people in Afghanistan. The first picture is a girl who lives in Afghanistan, and the second picture is a Germany refugee who already lived in Afghanistan. So now we come to one of the most important parts of my research, resistance. Adichie argues that gender inequality should not be treated as women's responsibility alone. She says all of us, women and men, must do better. For me, this is important because feminism then becomes more than an individual women's struggle. It becomes a question of collective responsibility. We can see a similar idea in the testimony of Behind Shadari. This is also an Instagram account. The second picture you can see. An Afghan refugee living in Germany, her statement, "No women are free until all women are free," takes the discussion beyond the individual. It becomes a collective feminist statement. Another powerful example is Afghan athlete Manisha Talash. During the 2024 Olympics, she displayed the message "Free Afghan Women." You can see in the third picture. So, what I find significant here is that her resistance moved beyond social media and entered an international public space. She used a global sporting platform to make Afghan women's struggle visible. She was later disqualified because of the political message. But that itself shows how powerful visibility can be. It also reminds us that resistance does not always have to look the same. For one woman, resistance may mean speaking. For another, it may mean continuing her education. For another, it may mean documenting her experience. And for another, it may mean publicly refusing to remain invisible. So, resistance can take many forms. Now, I want to compare these three women's narratives and I want to connect it with Mohanty's transnational feminism idea. So, the comparison between Adichie's work and Afghan women's digital narratives reveals several important connections. We can begin with visibility. Adichie talks about women being taught to shrink themselves, while Afghan women can face restrictions that directly regulate their physical visibility and public presence. Then there is education. Adichie challenges gender based assumptions about women's ability, whereas Afghan women can face institutional barriers that prevent them from accessing education itself. The same applies to employment. Adichie points towards the underrepresentation of women in higher positions. In Afghanistan, women can face restrictions that limit their participation in employment altogether. Then we have culture and mobility. Both contexts show that women's movement and behavior can be regulated, but the political and social circumstances surrounding those restrictions are very different. And finally, we have collective resistance. Adichie calls for collective responsibility, while Afghan women use digital platforms and international spaces to make their experiences visible. So, if I have to express the central argument of my comparative analysis in one sentence, it would be this: we can connect women's experiences without making those experiences identical. That for me is the importance of Moganty's transnational feminist perspective. It gives us a way to build connections across different women's experiences without reducing those women to one universal category. And this ultimately brings me back to the central question of my research. Why is feminism still necessary? So, to conclude, my research demonstrates that feminism is not simply a movement that belongs to the past, it remains an ongoing necessity. The experiences of Afghan women make this particularly visible through restrictions on education, employment, mobility, identity, freedom, and public participation. But at the same time, I think it is equally important not to represent Afghan women only as victims. Their digital narratives show that they are also speakers, learners, narrators, and agents of resistance. The testimonies are held here and behind Charari, along with Manisha Talash's public act of resistance, show us different forms of agency. And Adichie's work helps us understand that gender inequality can also operate through everyday social expectations, through the ways women are taught to behave, speak, occupy space, and understand their own abilities. Mohanty then gives us the framework to connect these experiences while still respecting their differences. So, I would like to end with one simple but disturbing thought. Even a worm has visibility, even a worm has the freedom to move, yet there are Afghan women who are denied these basic freedoms. And that makes us reconsider the question, is feminism still necessary? Perhaps the experiences of Afghan women themselves have already given us the answer. Feminism is not merely a story of the past. As long as women are denied freedom, opportunity, dignity, visibility, and agency, feminism remains an ongoing necessity. And this is not the responsibility of women alone. As Adichie reminds us, all of us, women and men, must do better. Therefore, my research concludes that the struggle for gender equality requires not only individual voices, but also collective responsibility. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present my research. Once again, I sincerely thank HOD ma'am and all my respective staff members to their valuable guidance, encouragement, and support. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for an insightful and thought provoking presentation. Your presentation has given us an opportunity to look beyond the conventional understanding of history and feminism and to recognize the importance of women's voice, particularly those expressed through digital narratives. The connection you have established between Afghan women's digital narratives and Adichie's "We Should All Be Feminist" has certainly given us several perspectives to think about. We shall now move on to the question and discussion session, which is an important part of today's symposium. A presentation becomes more meaningful when it creates a space for question, different perspective, and academic discussion. I invite our respected faculty members, research scholars, and participants to share their questions and observations with our presentation.
Aruna ma'am, is there?
Yes, ma'am.
You want to give your comments, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. She has presented fabulous, ma'am. It's fantastic. And can you hear me, ma'am? I'm audible, ma'am?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Uh,
Thank you.
Madhivadhani,
Yes, ma'am.
your presentation was too good.
Thank you.
Congratulations, sir.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Madhivadhani, may I present my review?
Sure, ma'am. Waiting, ma'am.
Yeah. You have worked very hard. You have brought in many ideas. I feel that observation by Adichie, I mean, the emphasis by Adichie, we should all be feminists. She's just saying it in many ways that there's no need to say that there is no need of feminism. It's very much needed in this age. People are skirting around the need for feminism, it's still relevant. No, that's what she's saying. Am I right?
Yes,
Uh,
ma'am.
so that probably you could have used in your introduction. That
Okay.
why? See, the point is, when she says we should all be feminists, you're saying using that to say there is a situation in Afghanistan where
Yes.
feminism is relevant. Isn't that the point?
Okay.
So when a person like Adichie says we should all be feminists, she is where is she coming from? She's coming from the point of view where there is a certain school of thought which says it's feminism is like something of the 70s or 80s, and it's probably not relevant now, but she's emphasizing that it is relevant. Okay. Then second thing is this like this text by Adichie is also a digital narrative.
Yes,
It
ma'am.
was given as a TEDx talk. So you have to could have said a little bit about the reach of digital narratives above text narratives. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
see, when we talk about lives of Afghan women, at least people like me, we are familiar only with I Am Malala.
Yes.
Okay, so then I Am Malala was a story which took the whole world, and that point of time, digital narratives were not so much. There was not so much of social media at that point when that book came out. So see, you also have to say that um, digital narratives or these testimonials, these people, they don't need to write a book, or they don't need to be warriors like Malala to be heard.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so when you talk about agency, you say that digital narratives have given agency to women who may not be labeled as activists, warriors. Like even ordinary women are able to uh, come out with their life stories. And secondly, your theoretical basis is not so much what Adichie says as Mohanty's transnational feminism. It's my view.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Um, you can challenge me on that. I'm leaving it just because I'm HOD and Preeti ma'am. Don't take what I'm saying, right?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
yeah, and your title is Reconsidering the Necessity of Feminism. I think your title could have been Digital Narratives and Agency for Afghan Women. Digital
Okay.
media and agency. I think that's exactly what you wanted to say.
Okay, ma'am.
I don't know. Am I right? Do you wanted to say something more than that?
Ma'am, why I chose the topic is feminism is necessary. So I use that as a lens, critical lens, ma'am, to elaborate about Afghan women history.
Uh, they are telling their life stories and their experience through digital media. Is it?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I couldn't hear.
You, no, we are talking about digital media and Afghan women's life narratives presented through digital media. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So now Taliban is what has see there is an Afghanistan before Taliban, after Taliban.
Yes, ma'am.
So before Taliban, they had normal lives. They had agency. They went to university. They this went to school. They could speak. They had freedom. So you have to address the voicelessness that came because of Taliban, and um, uh, this how digital narratives have given them agency to speak.
Okay.
Um, so you didn't mention the see when you say feminism, you have to also speak about what form of patriarchy. So if
Yes,
it
ma'am.
is if it is Dalit feminism, what is the kind of feminism? What is the patriarchy that Dalit feminism is coming up against? Or what is the context of um, uh, masculinity, femininity, man woman relationships, not necessarily patriarchy, but now if you see African American women, they have black feminism. They are actually taking up for the men in their community, right? Um,
Yes, ma'am.
So, like in Raisin in the Sun, you see a black man who is humiliated on a daily basis and not able to be a real man. Okay. And you have black matriarchy there in that play, the strong black woman. Mm? So, you actually have to look, when you talk about a feminism, you have to talk also about the patriarchy or uh, the the men in that society and what they are coming up. Basically, you have to address what type of patriarchy is this type of feminism an antidote to.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah. So then Talpade Mohanty, she talks about global feminism, Western feminism.
Yes, ma'am.
And when you see, there's one book called Feminisms by Robin Warhol. Feminisms, like it's been like post-colonial studies has opened our eyes to think about literatures. There's not just one literature, but there are literatures. Right? So I think you need to address what is the kind of feminism that Afghan women are inscribing. See, when I write, no, I'm inscribing. When I take this pen and I write, or even a sculpture, a person who's doing sculpture, they are um, sculpting something. They are creating a new narrative. They
Yes, ma'am.
they're creating new terms. When I say transnational feminism, a new term. When we say uh, black matriarchy, it's a new term. So when we coin new terms, we are creating new language. So when we say, instead of saying handicapped person, we say physically
Different.
challenged. You don't say blind, you say visually challenged, right? So that's more positive, right? So we are creating a new narrative. You get my point? So
Yes, ma'am.
how are Afghan women creating new narratives about the identity of Afghan women through these digital narratives?
Okay, ma'am.
So your title could have been forging new identities, or uh, you could have even created a term which talks about their type of feminism.
Okay, ma'am.
Like Bama, she created that whether she created, I don't know, but I came across this term Dalit Pennium. Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
So, what
Yes,
is
ma'am.
what kind of feminism? See, what kind of feminism is it when women wear a hijab and speak? So, from a Western point of view, a woman wearing a hijab and speaking is she's not empowered. It means like that. She's still under uh, patriarchy. She's still oppressed by men. But we know that you can wear a hijab and still be an empowered woman in our part of the world. Yes, there are women who wear burqa and still are feminists. So, what type of feminism is this? And there are theories on Islamic women's voice. Okay, how
Okay,
they
ma'am.
yes they don't think that because if I become a feminist, I should remove burqa, I should remove my hijab, I should wear Western clothes. See, very often, no empowerment of women is taken to be Westernization. So there are Islamic women, Afghan women who don't subscribe to that view, and they say that we have our culture, we have our tradition, we have our mm, our culture, tradition, and our domestic setup within which we function as empowered people. I can see Dr. Shanmuga Priya on the call. Would you like to say something, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to add on to your point that you said what kind of patriarchy that feminism is acting as antidote. So I think the focus must be on religious patriarchy, how religion is used as a narrative to oppress women. And you said there must be a kind of feminism which Muslim women practice, that is called Islamic feminism. And there are books on it, how women in Iran and Afghan try to, as you said, wear hijabs and try to be empowered. So in places like Iran and Afghan, men use religion as a means to take away women's rights. So that's and, one more thing that she was also talking about was that uh, uh, she said physical and public spaces are being blocked for women. So she must have said that, like Adichie, the Afghan women cannot talk. That is why they use digital narratives. So that is what I wanted to add on.
And Talpade Mohanty, she talks about how the oppression comes through militarism. So that also you could have brought in.
yeah,
Taliban has
yes,
used militarism to suppress women. No,
yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
so
ma'am.
you have to list all the suppression of women and how this transnational feminism by Talpade Mohanty, which she's talking about, we are still, though we are not Western women and we cannot be judged by Western feminism, we, whether in Asia or in the Islamic world, we have our own type of feminism. Am I right,
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yes,
Shanmugapriya?
yes, ma'am.
And so there are specific oppressions and there are specific feminisms which are antidotes to those
Yeah,
oppressions.
yeah. In Iran
So
and Afghanistan,
we
even
are strategizing. They strategize within their context. So when a Muslim woman wears a hijab and speaks, she is actually strategizing. She's following her uh, religion. She's not given up her religion. She's following her culture, and yet she's speaking up for her rights as a human being.
So you have to actually you brought you. This is a brilliant paper. We are not putting it down. But the purpose of a research club is to make you rework your paper.
Okay.
You get the thing?
Yes, I would just like to add what
Yes.
to what Maria Preeti and Shanmugha Priya said. But I mean, she did say that resistance was necessary. She was comparing I mean, she was just setting these and just comparing and saying that the resistance is still there in spite of what do you call the activism? It is not the militant one. It is. She was trying to tell us about the Afghan women now, but Afghan women before Taliban were actually a very empowered lot. They were into Western dresses. Many of them. I do not know about the very hardcore religious people, as Preeti said, but within that space too, they did occupy great. They did occupy many important positions. It was only after the Taliban that all this has happened. So it is they are kind of reclaiming. So if there is any, I do not know about any books on all of this stuff, but if there is a kind of, if there are narratives where you get to know whether they were, about what happened and how they are managing now. She's only taken digital narratives, so it is very few books have. I think after Taliban, I don't think many books have come out, or where these things are not discussed there. No, their life is totally blocked. Their kind of life is totally blocked. So she has actually tried to compare and say, but I think as a research scholar, she has to go into and, as you said, specify which type, find out whether there are narratives other than digital. There are narratives where you can get to know the real Afghan situation, women's situation. I don't know, but everybody has now under Taliban. Everybody has to wear the hijab and follow the Muslim religion, and doctors are prevented from being all this. Only we hear from. Doctors are prevented. They're not even women cannot be doctors. All this. This is what I have gathered from the digital media only. I haven't read any thing. So it's good she can continue in that line and specify or find out if there are particular areas. The Western model may not work, as she said. Mohanty's, yes, some of them do, but not all of these. Those would work with these people. There are these people, since they were empowered before, they might be even more, they might have even more strategies of resistance than other women in Africa and other places. So you could also go into that and see. So I think I'm off. Okay, I have got.
Thank you, Srilata ma'am. As always, to the point and able to adjudicate. Someone told me that there is something called piety movement, PIETY, among Islamic women, where they subscribe to their religious beliefs and whatever their religion teaches them about a woman's space, and yet they uh, they are feminist. They speak for the uh, they speak for the rights of women. So you look up some books, as Shanmugha Priya ma'am said, Islamic feminism. You can look up on that.
Okay.
Actually, that would be more pertinent than Adichie's "We Should All Be Feminists." You get the point?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I'm comparing Nigerian context and the Afghanistan context. That's why I didn't use specific feminism, ma'am.
You're comparing Nigerian and Afghan, is it?
Different countries, but their oppression are not same. That is what my argument, ma'am.
Okay. Then you could, okay. Then you should have specified what is the Nigerian context that Adichie is speaking of. You should bring the context, Nigerian context, Afghan context. She says this in Nigerian context. She says this in Af- these people is what this is what is said in Afghan context.
Yes, ma'am.
So anyhow, if you need to rework, we can brainstorm again
Okay,
on
ma'am.
campus. But it's a very brave uh, venture.
Thank you, ma'am.
Continue doing more work like this, Madhivadhani.
Thank
It's
you, ma'am.
not about, there's nothing about, there's no one who's right or wrong in all these things. Okay, and there's not only one way of looking at it. So you can just, you don't have to take all that we said,
Okay, ma'am.
but you can reflect on it and fine tune your work.
I want to
Okay.
congratulate Madhivadhani for her work because digital narratives, Afghan women, that was a really nice topic.
Thank you,
And,
ma'am.
and we
Yeah,
would like
and I want to bring up Shanmugha Priya ma'am. She recently, you know, presented her photographs at a photography exhibition, and in that exhibition, below every picture there was a QR code describing the picture. So, though we are talking today about feminism, I'm coming to the point of digital narratives. So there is a audio message which describes that picture, and this goes to show again how digital narratives are being created for the visually challenged, for them to visualize. Uh, uh, One is, yeah, for them to narrative they visualize, that's one point, but whatever they have created for other visually challenged people for to probably connect. So there is one visually challenged person standing in front of this picture and wanting to know what it's about, and a very detailed description of that picture is given. So digital narratives are stepping into uh, another sphere in connecting with disability studies, you can say. There's that contribution to disability studies, or that crossover is there. Studies and all is what we put. These are the compartments we create. But this is what is happening in real life. That digital narratives are empowering visually challenged people and creating a platform and a space for them and advancing their cause. So, can we close this session?
Okay.
Thank you to everyone who actively participated in the discussion and contributed your valuable questions and perspectives. This discussion has helped us understand that feminism is not a single but universal experience. It is shaped by culture, history, politics, identity, and individual lived experiences. I would once again like to thank Mrs. Madhivadhani R for her well researched and engaging presentation and for responding to the questions. As we come to the conclusion of today's symposium, I take this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to our respected head of the department and all the esteemed faculty members for their constant encouragement and support. Today's session has reminded us that history is not only about what happened in the past, but also about whose voices are remembered, whose voices are represented, and whose voices are heard. Before we conclude, I would also like to share a reminder about our next In Tandem Research Club Symposium. Our next session will be held on 28th August 2026, and the topic for the session is Popular Film and Adaptations of Literary Texts into Film.
So let's meet at the next session and looking forward to your presentations.
We
Great
want
job. Congratulations, Aruna Madam, for shaping one more scholar. She's done extremely well under your guidance. And
We warmly invite all the faculty members, research scholars, and students to join us for another engaging and insightful academic discussion. With that thought, we conclude today's fortnightly symposium of the In Tandem Research Club. Thank you all for your valuable presence and active participation. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.